How you doing, Jill?
I'm doing well, Lee. How are you?
I'm in my pajamas, look, and my slippers,
Very
because
nice.
because it's 11 o'clock at night over here. I screwed it up.
Right.
I thought it was 11 a.m. in the morning, and it's not. It's 11 o'clock at night. So I quickly jumped in a shower, put on my best shirt, got my plants next to me, all raring to go.
Looking beautiful at 11 p.m.
So you've been very busy, I gather.
Yeah, that's true. I'm chatting with you in between seeing patients today.
Well, we'll keep you to your hard stop. I promise you about that. I want to talk to you about two things today to get the most out of your expertise. But the first one I want to talk about is I run a forum called Strive, the Strive Community Forum. And one of the big issues that people have on that forum, and actually one of my biggest blog posts that people ever um, read was 10 reasons your marriage will fail when you quit drinking alcohol. And the same theme comes through, Jill, is that people decide to quit drinking alcohol. They think that it's a wonderful thing that they're doing. Yay, look at me. I've quit drinking. I'm so pleased with myself. I've done this for me, my family, my wife, my kids. And then the kids and the wife and the husband or whatever, they look at you and they're like, what have you done that for? And it's incredibly confusing
Yeah.
for the people who have quit. And the biggest problem is they don't know how to coexist in a relationship. Let's simplify this. Let's say a husband and a wife. So
Hmm.
when I quit drinking alcohol to save my marriage, I realized in that moment, or the moment after I'd quit in the preceding weeks, I turned very judgmental and critical of my
Mm.
wife who continued to drink,
Hmm.
and she left me.
Yeah.
Um, and I've often wondered, I'm glad she left me.
Hmm.
I really am, because my life has just changed dramatically, and I realized we were never supposed to be together.
Right. So it was a good thing in the end for you that someone who didn't support your drinking, then didn't support your abstinence, was no longer a part of your life.
Yes. I mean, she
But
said
I think, but the direction you're going in though is, what about when people decide to stop drinking and then they have people in their lives who are not supportive of them, who are
yeah,
critical of them or unhappy with them for
yes,
stopping drinking?
yes. And the other thing I want to talk about is, yeah, so in this instance, yeah, let's start off by saying a guy stops drinking alcohol and his wife continues to drink. How does that, what advice could we give to the man in this situation to learn to deal with the fact that he has somebody drinking alcohol in his home?
Well, I guess the first question is that really his goal? I mean, if when someone stops drinking, if you're saying he wants to not drink and yet wants to be okay with the fact that his wife continues to drink?
I think people the people on the forum who are quitting drinking, they're finding it difficult to be around people who don't drink, and it comes across like they are not sure how to communicate with them
Yeah,
in a way that makes everything okay. So it's
right.
okay. It's okay for this person to drink alcohol, and it's okay for you not to drink
To
alcohol.
not be drinking alcohol,
And
right?
how do you communicate and create some boundaries here? Because when I think back to my first marriage split, I realized that it wasn't the alcohol; it was the fact that neither of us knew how to communicate.
Yeah, right.
And
Well,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, when I hear your question to me again, then is really about communication, right?
I
And
think
Lee,
so.
I think you know a little bit about this, but when I'm working with patients who are having difficulty in relationships, really regardless of the type of relationship, I really like to use something called the 5 secrets of effective communication. That's been described and written and created by Dr. David Burns.
Mhm.
Um, And I mean, the first question though that I need to ask the patient, or the person in this case, let's say the person who decides to stop drinking, is actually, are you willing to look at your role in the problem? In other words, you probably feel fantastic about yourself that you've stopped drinking, right? You're going, yay, look at me, I rock, I stopped drinking, and feeling really proud of yourself. And then when, let's say, your spouse is continuing to drink, you might feel annoyed or irritated, or maybe your spouse, you had even mentioned to me, Lee, the idea that the spouse is upset with you for stopping drinking, like not happy with it or something like that. The first question I would ask the person looking for help, in this case in your forum, let's say, is kind of, are you willing to look at your role in the problem? Because I could teach you communication skills to have a better relationship with this person, but those skills don't involve, directly changing the other person, right?
Okay,
our solution is not going to be, oh, Lee, okay, I can help you to convince your wife to stop drinking, right?
Yes, yeah.
I could help you to communicate with your wife while she's choosing to do something different than what you're doing.
Okay, so to use a real life example and to accentuate the point, what you're saying is if I would have come to you at that time when I was going through my marriage breakup, at that moment in time, I had no idea that I was being judgmental. I had no idea that I was making her feel bad and not accepted in the relationship. And if you would have asserted that I was behaving that way, I would have defended myself to the hilt. So what you're talking about here, if people are listening, is we really need to kind of check in with ourselves. And I often say to people, if we always try to take 100% responsibility for our situation and our circumstances, then that allows us to have that self-introspection, right?
Right. I mean, the truth is, it's very humbling and it's very hard to take personal responsibility. But in my opinion, it's very empowering, because I actually have control over my own behavior. I mean, if you tell me you got to look at your role, then at least I know something can change, because that means I can do something about it, right?
Yeah.
You really can't change other people, right? People will change if you change, right? I mean, if you change the way you're communicating with someone, they will have to respond in kind. If someone is angry with you and you're actually empathic or disarming or seeing truth in what they're saying, their anger will de-escalate almost instantly. So you have a lot of control. You have impact on other people, but I couldn't directly advise you of like how to get your wife to fall in line, right? But I could definitely say, Lee, let's take a look at the way that you're communicating with your wife, or even would you be willing for a minute to sort of see the world through her eyes? Like in your case, I actually know nothing about the specifics of your case. So I'm just imagining, like, husband and wife are both drinking together, and then husband decides to stop drinking. I'm sure your wife has a lot of feelings about it, right? Not just positive ones. And so the idea would be being willing to sit down and have a conversation and say, what is this like for you? I want to actually understand how you're thinking and how you're feeling and what impact this has had on you.
It wasn't until long after the divorce, and I was taking a flight to Vienna, and I was reading Don Miguel Ruiz, The Mastery of Love, I think. And I read the book from front to back on my trip. And it was in that moment reading that book where I had that aha moment when I was like, holy shit, I was really trying to change this person into something more to my satisfaction, a non-drinker who behaved in this way. And I suddenly realized that by doing that, she must have felt absolutely horrifically unwanted and undesired and
judged, right? And put down, misunderstood, and
so I'm hoping that this podcast that we have and the subsequent podcasts that I do beyond this about the same subject will act as that Don Miguel Ruiz light bulb moment for other people to think, Jill and Lee are saying that I need to think about what I'm doing. Okay, let's have a think about it. The other thing I just wanted to mention there was,
might be hard for people to swallow though, because they feel like they're working so hard to stop drinking. Now I also have to work hard on my relationship, like you should just be cheerlead, so it's very hard to take this much personal responsibility. Like I said, I recommend it. It's really rewarding, but it's hard work. right?
It's that what you said about we talking about personal responsibility for people listening is so important, because so many people, they quit drinking, they end up getting kicked out of the house for whatever reason, or they get kicked out of the house because they're not quitting drinking. And the first thing they start to say is, oh my God, what can I do? She has control of my life, or he has control of my life, or he's got my kids, or she's got my kids. And it all comes down to somebody then relying on somebody else to change their behavior or to act in a certain way where you've got no control over that. Like Jill said, you've really got to think to yourself, well, what can I control? Well, I can only control my behavior and my actions from this moment forth, right? So I think that is beautiful. Okay, so we got the first question. Let's look inwards and ourselves. Let's say the person is willing to do that. What then?
Yeah. Okay. So then if the person's saying, yeah, I am willing to look at my role in the problem, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Then, you know, I'm borrowing a little bit from kind of the cognitive therapy that I do with my patients that I've learned from David Burns, who I just mentioned before. So usually when I have a patient, in this case, again, a person on your forum in front of me, I'll say, well, could you even take a specific example, like a recent conversation? And what did the other person say that kind of set you off? And what did you say? How did you respond? And can we look at how you responded and see, you know, was that effective? Did that actually bring about this like wonderful warmth and connection from the other person, or did it backfire and actually cause an escalation? And likely if the person's needing help, then they're going to say, oh no, of course it backfired and it caused an escalation. And let's see, so what were you doing in that interaction? Again, it's just getting more specific, right? The first question is kind of, are you willing to take responsibility? And then the second question would be, let's think of a moment in time then where you were struggling in this relationship with this other person, and kind of what did you say? What are you struggling with responding to? And then I would say the crux of it is to be able to be empathic to the other person's perspective, right? So likely, let's say in the situation, the wife says, you know, God, you're no fun anymore now that you stopped drinking. You know, I'm sure anyone who just stopped drinking would likely to be defensive. What do you mean? I'm healthier. I did this for you, which is defensive and just going to lead to an escalation. Right. And instead, what we want to do is actually in that moment, just be empathic, you know, and say, you're right. I'm probably not as much fun as I used to be. We used to get hammered together and we're not doing that anymore.
There was,
right. Imagine what it would feel like if someone said, you know, you're right. It always feels really good when people say that, right?
Yeah. But here's the thing. Two things come up for me then. One of them is when you talked about reflecting on the effectiveness of a conversation you've had, right?
Yeah.
So I've done some coaching with yourself and David and stuff. And when my wife gets on my nerves, which I get on her nerves more than she gets on mine, but when she gets on my nerves, I'll have this conversation in my head about what I should say, which is the most effective way of communicating in this moment. Okay. But I also have this other little voice in my head saying, no, screw effectiveness. You need to win this. And I'll almost say to myself, don't say it, Lee. Don't say it, Lee. Don't say it, Lee. Oh, I've just said it. And I just can't seem to, I'm getting better at it. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is this really isn't easy, right?
No. Right. I mean, I want to say I have hope. It's very effective. There's no question in my mind. Definitely. Like I said, imagine when you're angry and you're criticizing someone, if the first thing they say is deep breath, you know, you're right. I see what you're saying. You must be feeling A, B, and C. I mean, it's like you want us to put down your daggers and like give them a hug, you know, so it's incredibly effective if you can do that. But you're right. It's totally challenging because when we're, you know, getting triggered or we're angry with another person, we just want to get in there and put up our dukes and have at it. Right. I mean, it's just, I don't know, it feels somehow better when you're angry to just unleash your anger on someone. It's never the right thing to do, but I hear what you're saying. It's hard. You can feel I think what you said was correct. It's like, don't do it if you're feeling really emotional. I mean, if you're really upset with your partner, figure out what you need to do to sort of calm down, reduce your own distress, right? Like, if that's go exercise, do yoga, talk to a friend, read a book, listen to music. I mean, do what you need to do to sort of calm down all of that arousal, and then think about what you want to say and think about how you can come back to that person and find some truth in what they're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a long time to get this, but I realized with Liza that what I have to do is I have to have space, sometimes 24 hours, in order for that little voice to disappear.
Right.
Because without a shadow of a doubt, when I just hold space for Liza and I can really almost agree with her and have empathy with her and understand her, the whole dynamic of the conflict changes. There is no conflict.
Right.
But I need to have some space in that.
Yeah.
The other thing
Yeah.
that I wanted to ask you, with my ex-wife, when I try to use skills, she always thinks I'm just being condescending or sarcastic. I'm kind of guessing that doesn't just happen to me, especially if you've not ever been empathic, and then all of a sudden you just start to be empathic. And you get hit with a response which you're not expecting, and you're like, "This doesn't work. I'm going to go back to the way that I was." There's got to be some patience here, right? And some.
Yeah, well, I guess what you're saying is if the other person perceives you, number one, as being inauthentic, right? Is that right? Or maybe you're just saying too, Lee, like if there's a person that you've always been really argumentative with, and then suddenly they say, you know, you're such an a-hole, and you say, you know, you're right. I think I have been an a-hole. They're going to look at you like you have three heads, or like, who stole my husband? You know, like what, right? What kind of, what have you been doing? And that, I think, I mean, if it's that someone just says like, well, what is this crap? Like, what are you saying to me? You know, maybe it's that you actually need to say something really authentic. Like, look, we spend so much time arguing and I'm always defending myself. And like, I want to try something new here. You know, I mean, I'm saying before you change your tune, like maybe you warn the other person and you say, you know, look, right now I want to wring your neck, but I'm going to try to take a deep breath and think about how to respond to you in a more respectful way.
Yeah.
And I know this is going to feel really clunky and maybe even artificial, but I'm trying it because I really care about our relationship, or, you know, something that sort of sets the stage.
That works for me. I always find that empathy in itself is a skill for me. So very often if someone thinks I'm being condescending, it's not just because they're not used to me behaving in this way. It is because I'm not doing it right.
Yeah. Right. You know. Well, you know what? It just occurred to me that it can sound kind of condescending. And some of it depends on, is your motivation really to connect with this person? Or are you just trying to control this person's anger? Because like maybe with your wife, you really want to connect with her. And so maybe it comes off more authentically. You say, you're right. You know, I have been kind of a jerk, and like, I really care about you. And, you know, it can come off maybe more natural and empathic. And by the way, we didn't get to I feel statements, which we should, because I don't want people to think it's all about like placating the other person. There is a part where you need to share your feelings too. But perhaps with your ex-wife, she just feels like you're trying to manage her. You know what I mean? Like with someone that you don't have a good relationship with, if you're going like, no, I know you're right, because I don't know, there's something about like affect and delivery and like authenticity that probably people can pick up on. And so you can use these tools to connect with someone, or you can use them to sort of maybe artificially sort of try to get them to de-escalate. And then maybe it comes across like you're talking to a patient on a psych ward, you know, where you're just trying to like get them to not scream at you or something.
Yeah. And I found over time as well that in the beginning, there was a part of me that was thinking, oh, this is so scripted. Why have I got to talk like this and be like this? But over time, when you just keep practicing it, it just becomes normal, who you are, the right way to talk. You just evolve. Your communication evolves until you're just naturally doing it. For me, not all the time. I'm still not great at it, but, you know, I'm always I'm always mindful after the act that I've screwed up, which is something
Yeah.
that never used to happen before. And I guess if you keep practicing it, by the time I'm 80, I might be able to catch it in the moment. But you know, yeah. So, all right, you were talking about I feel statements. What do you mean by that then?
Yeah. So I was saying, I mean, generally I do start with some form of kind of disarming and empathy toward the other person. So disarming is really just saying, you know, you're right, I did screw up, or you're right, I'm not that much fun these days, or some sort of finding agreement, right? And you have to do that authentically. You can't, I mean, if someone says, you know, you are always late every single time you're late, and you're not, you know, then you don't say, you're right, I am late every single day. You know, you say, you're right, I really did keep you waiting today. You know, you sort of have to find the real truth in it. And then you share some what we call feeling empathy toward the other person. It sounds like you're feeling really frustrated or really annoyed or let down or disappointed. But then I express some I feel statements myself, which is truly like the place where I can be assertive, not trying to tell the other person what to do, but just to bring myself into the equation. So I say, you know, to tell you the truth, I'm also feeling kind of hurt and disappointed. It's easier to do if we have a context. So I'm happy to do some role playing if you want to, and we also don't have to. But I feel is simply saying I feel followed by an actual feeling word. So I will tell you my favorite error that people like to make, and we all do this, is when you say like, I feel like you're not treating me well. Which is not an I feel statement, right? That is just blame. Disguised I feel statement. But so I feel has to be followed by an actual emotion. Like I feel hurt, or I feel rejected, or I feel disappointed, I feel frustrated. Sometimes it's if I really did screw up and I am authentically just feeling bad, then I'll say I feel really badly that I hurt you in this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. And moving on then to the 5 secrets of effective communication.
Yeah. So we say like disarming is one, right? So we covered that one. And then we've got thought and feeling empathy, which kind of go together. So that's that. It sounds like you're feeling, you know, frustrated or disappointed. And then we have I feel statements, which I covered. So that's I'm feeling this way. And then there's stroking. And stroking is essentially being able to say something complimentary. And again, it has to be true and warm, like even in the heat of battle. And so, you know, sometimes like if I took it, maybe there's a silly example, but if I were late to dinner for someone and they were really mad at me and I said, you know, you're right, I was really late and I'm guessing that you're feeling kind of annoyed and, you know, mistreated or I don't know, not appreciated by me. And I feel badly that I've kept you waiting because, you know, you're always so prompt and I appreciate that about you. Like that last piece would be stroking, right?
Right.
I'm just saying, cause here you are kind of busting your butt to get here. And that, you know, says a lot about you. Or even just, I feel really badly that I kept you waiting because I really care about you. That's stroking. And then we usually try to end the whole situation with an inquiry, which is just to say, that can take a number of different courses, but I can say something like, you know, do you feel like I'm getting you right? Am I understanding you? Or how do you feel now that I've said this? Or how does that sound to you? The only thing I would say that inquiry is it's not problem solving. So it's not, what are we going to do about that? And that's a great place to get to soon, but you want to wait until you finish kind of talking about what's going on between you and the other person, and the other person feels heard and understood before then you can come back and say, you know, maybe there's something we can talk about to sort of figure out how to fix the problem.
Okay. So, it all sounds to me, with the exception of the I feel statements, is in what we're doing is we're having a shift here. And instead of everything being about me, or I feel really bad because you're treating me like this, I feel terrible because I quit drinking alcohol and you're not supporting me, is that we're actually making it about the other person.
Yeah.
And by making it about the other person, it will disarm the conflict and it will enable more deeper, meaningful progress and advancement in communication rather than going backwards, you know?
Right.
Especially when couples, like when I split up, for example, I had a 10-year-old boy, and my boy lived with his mum, so I felt like I didn't have any control there. So I felt that my relationship with her had to be really good so I could get to see my child even. Not inauthentically so I could see her. I needed to really push aside any kind of malicious thoughts or to defend and really empathize with this person, because it was such a greater thing, because my son was involved as well. So it was important for his sake that I learn to communicate as well. So what do you think about, I guess people listening to this, I know if I would have been listening to this back then, I would be completely overwhelmed.
That's a lot of information.
Yeah, I'll put some notes. I'll put the 5 secrets of communication. I'll write something up and put it in the show notes for everybody so they can follow it at their own pace. What do you think about doing homework? So your wife's just kicked you out. You're on your own, living in your mum's spare bedroom. You can't see the kids. You can't see your wife. You don't know what to do yet, but you know you need to talk to her to sort something out. What's the advantage here in terms of trying to script out what you could possibly say beforehand and then going into the conversation? To me, that sounds a lot better than doing nothing and then going in to have that conversation.
Totally. Oh, I completely agree. I mean, even in therapy, I require all my patients to do homework. I say, if you're really motivated, if you really want, in this case, if you really want this relationship to change, if you really want to have a better relationship with your wife, even simply for the sake that you can see your child, which is a pretty powerful motivator, then are you willing to do some work to that end, right? And I would say, well, so to keep it simple, then I would say, exactly what we've talked about, which would just be like, can you sit there with a pen and paper and really think through, what might she say to me that's going to piss me off, where I'm going to lose it? And practice writing down, how can I disarm that? How could I empathize with that? How could I see the world through her eyes? And remind yourself that that is not losing. That's winning. Because if you can have a positive conversation with your wife, your ex-wife, then you're winning. That's your goal. That's what you want, right? Your goal isn't to put her in her place and to make her feel badly about herself. Your goal is to have more time with your child or whatever it is.
Oh my God, that is just so important. I know I'm kind of projecting my own issues and problems on the world, thinking that it's broad brush and everybody.
Well, I'm sure if it applies to you, it applies to many people.
Yeah. So that was just an amazing light bulb moment for me. As a man, when I engage with my ex-wife or anybody else for that matter, in a debate or a conflict or an argument, my goal always, my genetic DNA cellular-like goal is to win at all costs. However, what does winning look like? Now, I believe in that stupid caveman-like moment that winning is shouting louder and dominating this other person, right? Until they back down like 2 lions fighting over a lioness, right? But ultimately, that's a load of bullshit. Because if the goal is to see your kids, if the goal is to get half of what you're owed from a divorce, if the goal is to have a really wonderful relationship with your ex, if the goal is to get back with your ex, then winning means you need to do this 5 secrets of effective communication.
Right.
Yep. You need to look.
And winning is having a good conversation, right? Winning is having the other person be less adversarial, right? It's like I would measure my success in this scenario not by the fact that I beat her down, with words, but by the fact that we actually, got along or agreed, or that she said something kind in return. I mean, that's winning, right?
Yeah, it's almost like we need to ask ourselves, people, what's the goal here? And then what are the strategies we need to do to reach that goal? And some of the strategies may be counterintuitive to you, but you're going to have to go out of a limb and do some risky. Another thing that come up for me there, Jill, was I'm always telling people when they quit drinking alcohol, right now, do a risk assessment right now. What are all the things that you know that could happen in your life that will result in you drinking, right? Write a big list of them, right? How can we eliminate them or introduce mitigation to reduce the risk, okay? And then do the preemptive action, okay? Almost like an astronaut. Astronauts Don't wait. They spend
Yeah,
their
and we
entire
call it
life.
stimulus control too, right?
Right,
Like this,
right,
that's similar, right?
right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so what you're saying is to do exactly the same thing in
Yeah,
a
with an
relationship.
interpersonal situation.
And I think
Exactly. In a relationship.
I'm going to I'm going to write to everybody about this, but if you're listening to it, let's just talk about it right now. I think the Strive Community Forum could be used for this. So, for example, let's just say that somebody has got an issue whereby their wife has kicked them out of the house. They don't know what to do. There's no reason why we cannot have these role plays on the Strive Community Forum.
Yeah.
As long as we understand the 5 secrets of effective communication and I spread them out to people, there's no
Yes.
reason why we can't support each other. And then you go back into the lion's den, you do
Yes.
your thing, and then you come back with feedback and we tweak them and we help you achieve
Right.
your goal.
Right.
Perfect. I like
That's
that.
awesome, Lee. And when you think about it, it's almost like a little bit the opposite of what happens when people go to their friends. Like you go to your friend and you're going, oh, my wife is such a bitch or this and she this and she that. And your friend's like, oh man, I can't believe that happened. And you should
Yeah.
just tell her to go F herself, whatever. And so
That's
the
true.
idea would be, right. I mean, we kind of rile each other up about like, we go to a friend to complain about something. Our friend is not usually like, now,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
see the world through the other person's perspective. Usually we're kind of getting each other more riled up. So if you could use your community to sort of clarify, well, what's your goal? I mean, if your goal is just to get me on board with beating up your wife, okay. But like, if your goal is actually to have a better relationship with her, I think I could do something different here that we could, role play. How could you talk to her and how could you turn that around? And
That
yeah, I think
that
that'd
is
be awesome.
That is another really amazing point that everybody should really take some time to digest, because what happens in a conflict situation, or every conflict situation I've ever had, is it's done. It's over. I got steam coming out of my
Yeah.
ears. What's one of the first things I do? I pick up the phone to a friend, or I
Yeah.
go running to my mum or someone who's really close to me, right? Or I go onto the forum and I type in and complain. And everybody I go to likes me, loves me, is
Yeah,
supportive.
exactly.
And very
Yeah,
few of them will give you the truth, honest assessment.
that's
Most of
right.
them will say, oh, what a bitch. And she's running off to do the same. And that's it. So we're getting our incorrect assumptions are getting actually
Yeah,
solidified by the
exactly.
wrong people. So the forum is good if we all are able to give really kind of like honest feedback, and
Yeah.
then the people getting it don't run away. They don't come to the forum and say, oh, this is all wrong, blah 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 blah, and expect us all
Mm-hmm.
to agree with you. There are times when we're going to
Yeah.
say, okay, this is going to be tough, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe your
Right.
wife has got a point and we need to look at that. Don't go
Yeah.
running away. Just stand up and be strong and take the
Yep.
pain and go through it. I like that, Jen.
Right. To kind of hold each other's feet to the fire.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. Was
The
there any?
other thing I was going to say, Lee, which is maybe a little bit complicated, but I'll throw it out there anyway, when you were asking what can people do in preparation from that conversation. So again, some of this is like a motivational thing, right? Thinking about what is your goal, that your goal is to be closer to this person, to be more at peace with them rather than to win the fight. The other thing you can do is kind of paradoxical. And Lee, I think you'll know what I'm talking about here, but it might be complicated for the audience. But the other thing you can do is you can make what's called a paradoxical cost-benefit analysis. So you can list what are all the advantages of screaming and yelling at the other person. What are all the advantages of letting her have it?
Right.
And then write those down, because this is paradoxical, because most people don't really admit that like you feel good when you yell at someone. And then you ask yourself, okay, given all of those advantages, like, why do I actually want to change? Like, meaning, what are the disadvantages of yelling at this person?
Right.
And there it might become really clear. I mean, the advantages would be it feels better, it's easier, I can show her who's boss, et cetera, et cetera. The disadvantages might be I don't get to see my son for 3 weeks, or
Right.
she goes to court against me, or whatever it is, right? And so you can kind of also do that as an exercise to motivate yourself, right? It's to acknowledge that there are lots of advantages to keeping up the negative conversation, but to get yourself to really pinpoint what are the disadvantages and do I really care enough to work on this?
I love that. The other thing I often say to myself when I do that is, do I want to be that person? Is that who I want to be?
Right.
And that to me is always a sobering thought. It always kind of wakes me up because we do have those feelings, don't we? We
Right.
do. We are like, yeah, I really want to put her in a place. We do have those feelings, but then you look at it, you think, I don't want to be that person, really.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
snap out of it. You know.
Right. And you might want to remind yourself, you have every right to have those feelings, but you don't necessarily have every right to, express them, right? Or at least recognize you have every right to feel the way that you feel, but there's, if you go ahead and express all those negative feelings in a rude, obnoxious, demanding way, you're not likely to get what you want.
What about? What about? I mean, we're talking about effective communication because we want to make something work. What's the advice you give to people? You must have people that come and see you, Jill, and you're looking at them and you're thinking, you two should not be together.
Yeah.
Or why are you fighting for this person? It's clear that this is not good for you.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, there's a question that I ask everyone when they start to talk about another person in therapy. So when someone comes and they start to talk about, this friend that they're not getting along with, or the husband, or, the coworker or something, after obviously listening and offering some empathy, I'll always ask people, I say something like, well, there are three outcomes and they each are, as far as I'm concerned, kind of equally positive. Any of these three are totally reasonable. One of them is that you really want to work hard to improve your relationship with this person, right? So you really want to get closer to this person. You really can envision having a wonderful, close, good, positive relationship, and you're going to work hard to do that. The other option would be that actually you're coming to me and looking for some help in leaving this person. And that's okay too. Like that could be a really positive outcome too. You could get some help and kind of feeling confident enough to leave this other person or to leave the situation gracefully or something like that.
Yeah.
And then the other option is that you're just looking for someone to kind of talk to about the situation and complain about it, but you kind of just want the status quo. I mean, there's something that's kind of easy and comforting about keep doing what you're doing, and you're just kind of looking maybe for some support while you do that. And so, this is decision making, right? Like not every relationship is worth working on. And so I want people to know that when you're having conflict with someone, even if you've invested a lot in the relationship, it's okay to decide that it's enough and that you want to end the relationship. And sometimes that's really better for both people.
I was with my ex for 20 years, and when it came to when she said I want a divorce, I was initially shocked because I realized she meant it. So I was shocked, and I remember her looking at me with tears streaming down her face, just saying, "Do I make you happy?" She was
Yeah.
asking me,
Yeah.
and I couldn't answer her, and she said, "Do
Right.
I make you happy?" And I said, "No, but you can."
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
I was a chicken shit. Like I remember knowing that this was right, that what she was doing was right, that this woman was not for me. But
Yeah.
all I could think about was my house, my car, my son,
Mm.
my vows, the people who would look at me, the people who would judge me, the shame. Um, would I? I'm not 18, virile youngster anymore. I was 35. Would anyone find me attractive again? All the wrong reasons to be thinking
Yeah.
of to stick within a relationship, but I could not have ever pulled the trigger. And I've said this a lot, Jill, is I think I would have stayed there miserable till the day I
Yeah.
died because I was too
Yeah.
scared to quit. Is there anything that I could have done that could have made me wake up and get more strength in that moment? Because I imagine people listening to this, someone maybe has been in a similar spot or is in a similar spot.
Yeah, well, first of all, I so appreciate your honesty. I think it's wonderful that you're able to talk about yourself and the way that you are. And I'm sure that that in of itself is really helpful for people just to hear that story. And I will say that I've also really had a lot of people in my therapy practice with similar stories where they struggled for a really long time in an unhappy relationship. And surprising to me, actually, sometimes like relatively quickly once they left the relationship, it was like agonizing and heart-wrenching to do it. But then once they did it, I have seen people, I don't know if it took a long time for you to recover or not, but I've seen people rather quickly actually sort of start to build a life for themselves. It's almost like they're not willing to let go, but once they have to let go, then they sort of are able to move on. It's not to say that it's easy, but I had a patient who was like 70 actually, and whose husband left her. And she was like, so anxious that she wasn't going to be okay on her own. And she just really was like a rock star. And it turned out much happier on her own. So that's just sort of my 2 cents. What can you do for someone? I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is that it's hard. I mean, I can't say there's an answer for what do you do for someone who's in denial, right? Like someone who's not willing to look at the fact that things are not good in their relationship and they're not willing to admit it. It's really hard. I don't think anyone can really force change on another person or force, let's say, enlightenment or I do think, and this is very simple, but I mean, I do think just doing like a kind of like a double, actually David Burns has a tool, it's called the decision-making form, but it's really just a 2x2 matrix, pros, cons, I mean, I think if someone's in a relationship that they're struggling quite a bit in, then it's absolutely worth it to think, what are the advantages and disadvantages of staying in this relationship? And also looking at what are the advantages and disadvantages of leaving the relationship. They're different things, you know what I mean?
I was going to suggest that actually, because I think had I done a cost benefit analysis, then at least it would have emptied my thoughts on the paper so I could see quite clearly that, hang on a minute, it's better that I leave, and she wants me to leave. I think had I done that, my subconscious would have eventually led me to where I wanted to go. Because I've also been on the other side of that with my wife Liza now, where me and Liza have gone through rough patches in the past, and I've done a CBA that said that I should leave, or she's done one that says she should leave me. Yet we've both gone, but no, we really want to work on this. So we then we've looked at it, all the reasons why, and then we've said, right, we need to shore those leaks up.
Right. So even just writing it out and making sure that you're really aware of it.
Yeah.
Right. And increasing your own accountability in a way, right?
Yes.
Like, let's look at this. And then you can always look at it and go, no, these, even if you have lots of pros for leaving and small cons, if the cons, outweigh the pros, they sort of matter more to you. They're about your values, whatever, they're about your happiness. You can always have more on one side, but you can decide that the shorter side is more important. Or like you said, you can say these things on the cons, these are fixable, and we're both in it to fix it,
Definitely. And just for people listening, to just reaffirm what Jill said about the 70-year-old woman, after I said, okay, I'm going to go with my mum's, I went to my mum's, and I had all this shame that I was leaving my boy, that I wasn't a good enough husband. But then all of a sudden, I had this lightness that I've only experienced one other time, and it was when I quit my job. It was the release. It was the release of responsibility.
Right.
And then I started to feel shameful because it felt good. It felt good not to have a mortgage. It felt good. I told a story that I couldn't do what I wanted to do in life, and I always had to ask my wife's permission, which was a bullshit. It was a bullshit story, but I believed it. And then all of a sudden, it was like an anchor. I could do what I want. It was very, very easy and very, very quick for me to put my life back together again.
I've seen that. I mean,
yeah. I was just going to say almost too quick for my ex-wife, because she then was like, "What's he doing?"
Right.
Isn't he supposed to be
Right.
sad and upset and miserable? Why is he traveling
Right.
around the world, changing his job, doing this alcohol thing? Yeah,
Right.
there was a lot to learn from
Absolutely.
that
Yeah. And
experience.
it's interesting, actually, Lee. I mean, it could be, I'm not sure. This is just like a sort of guess on my part, but it is often the case with anxiety when we feel anxious about something that if we actually do it, right,
Yeah,
it's not as bad as we think and we feel
correct.
much better. You know,
Yeah,
it's depression and anxiety are a little different, but I work a lot with people with anxiety disorders. And, you know, look, if you're afraid of heights, if you and I go hang out in high places, I promise you, you will get over your fear of heights.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you'll get over it faster than you think, right? So if it's anxiety, if it's I'm afraid to be alone, if it's I'm afraid that this won't work or that won't work, generally moving towards it, you know, actually reduces your anxiety. So when you sit here and you worry about it and you think about it and you ruminate about it, you continue to feel anxious and worried and you're not solving the problem. But when you kind of face your fears, quite often things are not as bad as you think and you get over your fears faster. And so it could be that that's, I know for this woman I'm thinking of, she was just
yeah,
incredibly anxious about being alone. And then when she was living alone, she's like, man, this is kind of nice, you know,
yeah.
like I have no one to bicker with anymore. And I can kind of get up when I want to get up and do what I want to do. And she kind
There
of liked
was
it.
there's an exercise that Jill and David taught me actually. I don't know the name of it, but what I did was every day, and this will help you to achieve what Jill's just been talking about. We've actually, without having to jump off a cliff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is every day I would keep an Excel spreadsheet and I would, let's say I was going to do this podcast with you today, Jill. I would
Mm-hmm.
score how much I felt that I was going to enjoy it out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right. So like kind of predicted pleasure,
yeah. And
right?
then,
How
and
much
then
you think it's going to be good.
after we finished it, I would then put the score of how I actually felt
Uh-huh.
and how much effort it took me to get it done as well.
Okay.
And what I found was almost universally, everything that I was doing or preparing to do that I felt anxious about doing or I didn't want to do. A good example is I write about poker articles to earn money to pay the bills, right? While I'm growing the Truth About Alcohol business.
Okay.
And of course, I don't like doing it because it's taking me away from talking to wonderful people like you. So
Uh-huh.
I score it really low. I'm not going to enjoy this. It's 5 out of 10. But then when I'm writing and then I finish and I do the score, it's 8 out of 10. Why am I talking about this? I realized time and time again that the act of doing something wasn't the problem. It was worrying about doing it that was
Yeah.
the problem, which is exactly what Jill's just said. So you can start to learn that and to see that by doing this same kind of technique, which is
Yeah.
daily, every day. Just right, I'm really worrying about seeing my wife today. I don't want to do it. Right, 3 out of 10. You go see her. How was it? 8 out of 10. Right, now if you average out over a long period of time, because some days it might be 3. If it averages out 7, 8 out of 10, can you handle that? Like, and
Right.
you start to see it more clearly, don't you? Um,
Yep.
well,
Yeah. And Lee, you've been so generous in sharing your own examples, but I could share my own, which is that yesterday when I got this email from Lee reminding me that I was going to do this podcast today, which I knew in the back of my mind, but I felt very nervous and anxious about doing it. You know, just this is a new format for me. I
yeah,
thought, I don't know
yeah.
what he's going to say. We've done this before, but so then now I'm having a ball. So if I had rated my anxiety and my predicted pleasure, you know, my anxiety would have been high. My predicted pleasure would have been kind of, I don't know, low to medium. And now this is like fun. We could do this all day.
It's the same with my one-on-one coaching. It's the same when people watch the Strive Community Forum, but they don't participate because
Yeah.
they're worried about sharing and being vulnerable. And then when they
Yeah.
share and they show their
Yeah.
vulnerability, they feel liberated by it. The other thing that I
Yeah.
wanted to stress that I thought was really important then is when you said about very often the action isn't as bad as the build up. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
in what we're talking about, if I one of the things that I really feel that me and my ex-wife screwed up is we didn't have a temporary separation. I think if you have a temporary separation, then you're able in that moment of a temporary separation to go, well, I actually like this.
Oh, yeah.
Or the other person could be like, actually, I've made a mistake here.
Yeah.
This cost benefit, I won't need to do this cost benefit analysis again because I didn't realize how much I would miss this person. So I think if you're listening to this and you're having troubles with alcohol, whichever way that's impacting your relationship, really try hard to have a temporary thing, especially if you've got children involved, just so you can really understand and feel what it's like all around.
Yeah.
Even if you eventually don't get back together again, that temporary, that buffer, it will allow you to work together to move forward and transition into your new lives a lot better, I think.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like training wheels, or getting yourself, getting over the hump of the separation, and then seeing what it feels like before you make the full decision.
Jill, we didn't get a chance to talk about the second thing we was going to talk about, so I'm not even going to tell people what it was. I'm going to keep it a secret. I'm going to keep
Maybe we'll do it another time.
Maybe we'll do it another time.
Since we had so much fun today.
Yeah. Jill, just want to say a big thank you for not choosing a job in IKEA or a library or being a plumber, which are all useful trades in themselves. But, for really changing, saving people's lives, I think it's what you do is just amazing. I love people in the service industry that help other people change their lives, and I just want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for spending time on the Alcohol Addiction Podcast, helping people to learn to communicate in difficult situations. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Lee.